A few days ago, I decided to see The Contestant, which is about a story I've heard of before since it became really viral, but I didn't know there was a documentary about it up until recently. The Contestant is a 2023 documentary on Hulu following the life of Tomoaki Hamatsu, a very kind and beloved person who has been working with charity organizations in his hometown Fukushima, helping those in need, especially after a severely catastrophic earthquake in Japan that caused irreparable damage, and he has also climbed at the top of Mount Everest. Alongside some other contributions, his positive outlook and character made him such an influential figure in Japan that manages to bring joy to everyone around him. But this is not what Tomoaki is mostly well known for. Instead, what people mostly know of him is his participation with the nickname Nasubi in a reality TV show back in 1998 where he went through severe physical and mental torture over the course of more than a year, which would be aired on TV for the entertainment of tens of millions of people tuning in every week. It works as such a shocking revelation on how dystopic the world of entertainment in the modern age can be. It feels like something you would see out of a sinister scenario of a survival game being broadcasted, testing a person's limits and profiting off of the raw emotions of despair. And it's not that far from the reality as we might think. The Contestant is a documentary that I strongly recommend if you haven't seen it already. It will alter your perspective on how much people's limits can be tested, there is a lot to unpack, and it does a great job of showcasing the depravity the entertainment industry can reach. It's well made, it's to the point, and for the most part, it was really captivating. Going into detail about the torture that Nasubi endured would be the predictable route, but this is not really what I want to focus on. There are certainly a lot of things I can say about the cruelty, the manipulation, and the ridicule he had to go through all this time, but this is something that has been discussed many times already, and on one way, I find this pretty understandable. It is unthinkable that such a thing would ever exist, last so long, and being broadcasted for millions to see. There have already been so many videos that discuss the topic even prior to the documentary. It gained a lot of traction with YouTubers like Penguin Zero making a video about it that has 23 million views as of this time. A lot of people have made videos and talked about this TV show, its evil practices, how sad and heart-wrenching it is, etc, etc. Being just another person mentioning the severity of the story is not really gonna do anything. I think we can all agree that this was a mistreatment, that this was wrong and disgusting, and how evil it is to put someone in such a humiliating position. I believe this is something we can all agree upon. There is another topic I want to discuss in regards to this film and Tomoaki's life. One that I've seen briefly mentioned in some cases, but in lots of them it seems like it's completely overlooked. In this 1.5 hour documentary, we spend the last 20 minutes showing the life of Tomoaki after the show ended, but not with direct correlation all of the time with the trauma that was caused, because the aftermath of how it affected his communication with people during interviews and his discomfort to wear clothes because he was used to be naked all the time is something that correlates with everything that took place and was also heavily discussed. But a big portion of these final 20 minutes are actually heartwarming and show a person that after everything he's been through, he uses his remaining strength to recover from everything he's been through and contribute on helping his community, and also found his new passion on mountain climbing, which led to him testing his limits his own way by contributing alongside a hiking group to climb at the top of Mount Everest. During those parts there are still a few mentions and correlations going back to this traumatic experience and how it may have affected him as a person. Even if you can say that this whole thing might have improved his survival skills or toughened him as a person, none of this mistreatment can be justified in any way. It was such a gross practice and it could have gone a whole different way. For example, what if this was done to a person who decided to sue the company for all the lies, manipulation, and awful treatment? What if Tomoaki was a vengeful person? It's very nice to see at the end this character growth as he recovers in a way from all of this and uses his remaining energy to bring smile to people's faces. That's what inspired him to become a comedian in the first place. He wanted to entertain people, but now, instead of laughing at him at his struggle, he puts a smile on people's face with his charisma and his help for the community. 20 minutes out of a 1.5-hour documentary might not feel as much, but it's actually a big chunk out of everything that is provided. In these final minutes, one might say that the movie drags on. It doesn't really have a lot to do with the subject at hand, it just serves as a nice way to showcase where Tomoaki is now and the way he lives by constantly providing to those in need. It is certainly a nice touch, but someone might say this could be summarized in a shorter period of time and show even more footage out of the show, displaying even more examples of his cruel way of living under those awful circumstances. And this is where it clicked with me. It happened while watching those final minutes, thinking to myself, it is an interesting choice to let all of this aftermath go on for as long as it does. Like I said, I decided to see multiple videos covering the contestant to confirm my curiosity, and indeed, in many cases, those final 20 minutes would be discussed very briefly, if even discussed at all. And I don't think it has to do with avoiding spoilers, but rather than the fact that we might not think that much of this final portion. Even if it feels little, it's actually quite generous that the documentary decided to spend 20 minutes out of this 1.5-hour runtime on this topic that is barely been discussed, and truth be told, there could have been even more about it. But the movie, to its core, is about the contestant. During those final 20 minutes of the movie, I was thinking, what if the movie was entirely about Tomoaki's contributions and donations? That would probably make for a dull movie, like who's gonna be really interested in that? We hear about good people making good actions from time to time. This by itself is not something new and wouldn't really gain that much traction. That's what I believe. But going back to this man's past, we see him being put into something so sinister and so evil, it's surreal. And because it's a reality we're not willing to accept, we can't really avert our eyes from everything that's happening. The contestant is so unique and so disgusting that it's impossible to go unnoticed. Isn't that interesting how we find ourselves more attached to a man's suffering rather than his contributions to society after everything he's been through? Here's the thing, I don't blame anyone for making a video about the topic and not wanting to focus on his contributions later on as we see towards the end of the documentary. I just feel that it opens up a discussion on how Tomoaki is going to be remembered. Like I said, I think it's very important to comment about this gross nature of a reality TV show airing something that is going to be used as entertainment for millions to observe. But what does that really say about us nowadays? Because at the end of the day, everyone who has been interested about the story, everyone who has been curious as of how real this is and how can this be real, is also part of the audience. We still get to observe what this man has gone through. The main thing that changes is how we perceive that event. Back when this was aired, the audience was under the impression that Tomoaki was aware of the whole process, that he was filmed, that this would air on television, the show would constantly use effects and quirky sounds to lighten the mood. The audience was under the impression that this was not that bad. Now, in 2023, with the release of the documentary, and even prior to that, we know everything about the show and what went behind the scenes, and now there's a new audience that watches this show and is repulsed, disgusted, and heartbroken. But apart from that, if you think about it, not a lot has changed apart from our reaction to anything that's happened. We also observe, we also bring attention to the subject, including myself. I'm not one to put myself out of this. I still make a video about it. I'm part of the audience. I participate in the viewing of a man suffering, and at the end of the day, this is all we do. We watch in shock and awe, and all we can do after that is talk about it and bring awareness, because it's truly fascinating. A big part though as of why this whole discussion is happening is because Tomoaki himself allows us to view what he went through on a different lens, one that is more sinister and more raw than the one Japan knew of at first glance. Things could have gone completely different under other circumstances. What if Tomoaki decided to sue the crew and the director? What if he would request for all of this footage to be deleted and never be aired again? What if he tried to escape? What if he would actually end up harming himself? since he had thoughts of suicide while in isolation numerous times, but instead Tomoaki consents on having a documentary made about his experience and an inescapable part of his life that is most likely going to impact him forever. And then there's this other side of Tomoaki, not the one of Nasubi, the television star that was famous without his knowledge, shown in the final 20 minutes of the film that are not talked about as much, mainly because it's just him moving forward. So what does that say about us? Tomoaki knows he cannot escape the hell he was trapped at for more than a year, but what's our part to all of this? Have we made the effort to make him actually escape? Or is it just a different audience compared to the one in 1998, only in the sense that the reaction and the reception is different? You see this title, the one thing that people don't mention about the contestant as much. A catchy title, grabs your attention, might work for the algorithm, not that it matters to me since my channel does not meet the criteria for monetization yet, anyways. So I'm doing this just because I like talking about stuff I'm passionate about. So you see this title, and what most likely came to mind has to do with a show, that there is another sinister piece to the puzzle that could make this situation even more gross and disgusting. But instead, the one thing that is not talked about as much is the more positive and heartwarming side of the documentary that comes towards the end. And it's not something hidden, it's not something that is hard to discover, it's right there. And not only is it there, it lasts for a long time, a segment that would have easily been way shorter and trimmed to an even further extent. But even with that being a significant portion of the documentary, we don't really mention it, because it's not really all that interesting, right? You listen to how I describe this man at first, and you might be like, I don't have a recollection of this person. And then I mentioned the nickname Nasubi, his participation on the TV show in Japan, his suffering, and then some of you might be like, oh, now I see, I think I've heard about this before. This is our main association with this person. Isn't that kinda strange? I don't want to guilt trip you and make you feel bad. This is not my intention. I'm no different than you. I just want you to think, why is it like this? We as people truly get more fascinated about a person's suffering rather than a person's positive outlook moving forward. Even if that part is ham-fisted to us for the last 20 minutes, we still tend to discuss the situation in a way as if the final minutes never existed. It's just about the show, about the suffering, and nothing else. And I don't feel we are to blame. This is a way we as people respond to information in the modern age. We want to learn more, especially if it's something unheard of, especially if it's about something so off-putting and so out there, but instead of putting the blame on ourselves or others as if we didn't know better, let's sit down and think. Think about how we react to stuff and what is it we take away from the information we gather. The latest contributions of Tomoaki and his charity help and his trip to Mount Everest only took the screen time of 20 minutes. Some might argue it's more than enough, and this work that he does brings joy to people, to his family, to those in his hometown, those in his community. But in terms of reach and fame and recognition, this is nothing compared to the tens of millions of people who will tune in to see a man naked, in isolation and despair, trying to survive. And so, do we want to remember Tomoaki as a hero for his community and the people around him, or do we want to remember Nasubi, a tortured person used for entertainment back in the day and compassion nowadays? We can remember him for both, but I hope you get what I mean. Or am I thinking too far and missing the mark? I believe it makes for a very interesting topic of discussion, so if you have seen this documentary, which I strongly recommend if you haven't, let me know what you think of all of this, down in the comments. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye.